Any description of the drumstick hand interface will always invoke the following term: fulcrum. Your first teacher may have described the fulcrum as the place you pinch between your thumb and your index finger to hold on to the stick. The fulcrum actually is a term used to describe the pivot point of a lever system. Let's look at a really simple lever system we're all familiar with, a child's teeter-totter. Let's build a little model using our two drumsticks. If I leave one drumstick here in the middle of the drum, pointed this way, I put the other drumstick across like this so that there's equal amount of material on either side of our fulcrum. We can load up both ends of our teeter-totter with two fingers. Let's say that these two fingers on each side represent two 50-pound kids. I have a simple machine, a simple lever system. It works because there are 3 points of force that are in balance with one another. I have a 50-pound downward force on this side, I have a 50-pound downward force on this side, and I have a 100-pound upward force coming in the middle. Our little machine works. Let's pretend that one of the kids had to go. This kid's dad starts feeling sorry for him and says, "Well, here, son, I'll help you teeter-totter." But he happens to be a 300-pound NFL lineman, so he gets on the other end of the teeter-totter. But the teeter-totter no longer works. Why is this? Because the 3 points of force are not in balance. We can bring them into balance by moving the fulcrum closer to the heavy load, thus and giving more leverage to the 50-pound kid. Now my system works again. It's in balance. I have 300 pounds on this end, I've got 50 pounds on this end, and I've got 350 pounds pushing up in the middle. When we're here, when neither side is touching the ground, that fulcrum is supporting the full 350. When we're playing the drums, what you really have is an upside down teeter-totter. The rebound from the stick is the 50-pound kid. My fingers are the 300-pound NFL lineman. They are teeter-tottering against the fulcrum. This system works because there's 3 points of force that are in balance. There's a misconception sometimes when it comes to this fulcrum point. Some people will talk about the balance point of the stick. Well, you can try this experiment yourself with your drumstick. Find the point where the stick seems to balance and create your fulcrum there. And try and play. And while you can make some noise, you can feel immediately it makes no mechanical sense. It's not about the balance point of the stick. It's about the balance point of the forces on the stick. One other trick to understand about this lever system. Let's say we'll build a simple lever system again here, but we're going to do a different task this time. We're going to move a heavy load. So I've got a fulcrum, I've got my lever set up, and I've got my fulcrum set here. Where am I going to push on this lever to move this heavy load? Am I going to push real close to the fulcrum? I could, but not much happens. The further away from the fulcrum I get, the less effort it takes for me to move the heavy load. I'm getting more leverage by putting the force further back from the fulcrum. So when we have the stick in our hands, if the fulcrum is at the point between the thumb and the index finger, we want to put force as far back from that as we can to get the most control. A lot of times I'll see guys playing like this with their index finger. As you can see, this is a short distance from the fulcrum. I can make it work, but there isn't much leverage there. If I use the middle finger, I get even further from the fulcrum, and all of a sudden I can feel the amount of leverage. I can even employ the ring finger and the little finger to get even further away. So it's a simple lever system. Let's look at what else we can learn from this teeter-totter analogy. So if I'm playing the drum like this, basically what's happening is my fingers, the upward pull of my fingers, are teeter-tottering against the upward force of the rebound against the downward force of my fulcrum. This system works because these 3 points of force are in balance. Let's talk about the teeter-totter for a minute. You must have had this experience as a child. I haven't met anybody who hasn't. You're teeter-tottering with your friend, everything's going nice and great, it's nice and smooth, and all of a sudden they decide to be a wise guy and jump off the teeter-totter, and boom! Your side of the teeter-totter crashes to the ground. The reason it crashed to the ground is one of the 3 points of force was removed from the system. It's no longer in balance. It was immediately out of balance and it ceased working. You might have also had this experience. You're teeter-tottering real nice with someone and the other person decides to jump up and down while the thing is reciprocating like this, and all of a sudden it starts shaking, kind of going like this. It's still functioning, but definitely not smooth. Drawing the analogy to the stick, if my fingers, the middle and the ring, leave the stick, it's like they jumped off the teeter-totter, and the teeter-totter no longer works. The tip crashed to the ground. Same thing if they even come off for a minute and then come back on. It's like someone jumping up and down on the teeter-totter. You're introducing out of balance-ness, if you will, into the system. It's no longer smooth. So the key to playing is to make sure that that the middle finger and the ring finger always maintain contact with the stick. Now that we understand the basic physics of the lever system we use when we play drums, an upside-down teeter-totter, let's talk about how the fingers ride on that teeter-totter. They can ride at various locations. Our fingers, the middle and the ring finger, basically are segmented by 2 knuckles. If we go from the tip of the finger to we call the first joint coming from the tip, the first knuckle, moving closer to the hand, the middle knuckle or the middle joint, let's call that the second knuckle, and the third knuckle is the one where it's attached to the palm. The stick can be placed anywhere on this system. Where's the optimal place? I found that the grip that I choose changes the location of the stick on these fingers. For example, if we go to German grip, which is palms down, sticks at 90 degrees, playing like this, the stick tends to ride in between my first knuckle and my second knuckle. If we go to another grip called French timpani grip, where the thumbs are on top and the sticks are parallel, I find that the stick tends to contact my middle finger between the second knuckle and the third knuckle, or the joint that connects it to the palm. I like to play with a grip that is halfway in between these two, which is, ironically, Europeans now are calling this the American grip. Basically, this grip allows the stick to be an extension of the arm. So it's in a straight line with the forearm. It kind of makes this thing like one long rope that we play at. The thing that this grip allows is for the stick to be on the pads of the middle and the ring finger. Why is this important? Well, the middle finger and the ring finger, any finger for that matter, is a lever system as well. So we have the lever system involving the stick, but we also have kind of a lever system that we're employing with our fingers. There are maximum leverage points on this system. Let me demonstrate. If you take your stick and you hold it in your hand so it's perpendicular to your forearm, notice how the stick is now between the first knuckle and the second knuckle. Squeeze it very hard. Notice how much pressure the stick is putting on your palm. Feel that. Measure that. Now release. Now let's move the stick, pivot the stick, so that it becomes an extension of the arm. Put the butt end almost into the crevice of your palm, right at the base of your thumb there. Notice how the first knuckle and what I call the pads of the middle finger and the ring finger are now on the stick. Squeeze this. Notice how much more force you're getting from this. One other trick you can see is if you do, when you're squeezing this, try and flatten the first knuckle. Because I'm not talking about pinching the stick like this, where these knuckles are, where you're on the tips of your fingers. We don't play from there. We play from the pads, which are underneath the fingernail. And if you squeeze hard so that the finger is flat from the fingernail all the way up to the second knuckle, you can feel that there's a lot more leverage here. There's another advantage for playing here as well. If I put the stick so it's in contact between the first knuckle and the second knuckle, and I hold it up here like this and cycle it as far as I can move it, notice how much movement I have from the stick. Now let's move it so that the pads of the middle finger and the ring finger are on the stick. See that I've got more movement here because there's more travel for the stick. This translates to allowing the stick to recoil more because the pads of my fingers are still on the stick. Once I get this far extended, it's like I'm at the tip of my ring finger, but the pad of my middle finger is still there along with the first knuckle. If I try and do that same open stroke, keeping the stick between the first knuckle and the second knuckle, I don't get as much recoil. That's the first knuckle, second knuckle. Here's the recoil from the end of the fingers, from that position. So it allows the stick to travel more. It allows us to get more leverage from the fingers. And it basically makes this unit one thing. Now it's funny, when we're playing trap set or we're playing drum set, I find that sometimes I'm actually using all of the grips. I'm using the American grip. Sometimes I might even be out to a German position, or I might be at a French position. But typically it's not witnessed on the snare drum. It's witnessed as I'm moving around playing all these other things. This is definitely a trap set type of grip. These other grips come from playing typically one thing. You're playing the surface directly in front of yourself. You're playing a snare drum. French grip is also French timpani grip. That's what it's been called for a long time. So it obviously was developed playing timpani. Since we're playing trap set, timpani is all at a level. It's around you like this, but it's basically all on this one plane. Trap set stuff, we're all over the place. We're up here, we're over here, we're hitting over here. For example, like I see a classic trap set move. If I go to play my floor tom, I'm not going to reach over to play my floor tom. I'm not going to move my whole arm to keep German position going when I play my floor tom. What I'm going to do is just turn my hand and hit the floor tom, because that's the shortest distance between 2 points, less movement. American grip facilitates this flexibility, in my opinion. So I'm a big advocate of that. I like to think of the index finger kind of pointing down. It helps keep the grip loose. If you notice, you watch some a lot of well-known drummers play, you'll see this where they're playing and their finger just is kind of dangling. Where you have the stick held like this, it also facilitates wrist strokes too, this one, by letting the finger dangle. It eliminates tension. When we try and play with too much tightness here, or by gripping with the index finger between the thumb, we're immediately inducing a lot of tension into the wrist, forearm, and the like. It just doesn't, it's not as loose as this is. There's another way you can help yourself feel this connectivity and what's going on with this. If we use something, if we take a stick, put the other stick on top of it like this, what we're doing is we're creating kind of an artificial fulcrum. The stick becomes the fulcrum point now in our system. And it doesn't allow, by keeping the index finger up here away from the stick, it forces these back fingers to get into play and to control the stick. A good friend of mine, Paul Stieber, showed me this, and it works. If you're having trouble releasing this index finger from this grip from years of playing this way, get yourself like a Sharpie or a little felt pen or something that you can put on top of this stick for a while, so that these fingers learn what it feels like to manipulate the stick. I'm not saying that I never use my index finger. If you watch me play, there will be times where my index finger is around the stick. But I'll guarantee you that even when the index finger is around the stick, the middle finger and the ring finger are also on the stick as well. Now that we understand the dynamics of the drumstick and the fulcrum, let's look at the rest of the system. I like to view this as a system of 4 hinges. The first hinge is the fulcrum, the pivot point of the stick. Moving up the arm, the second hinge is encountered at the wrist. While the wrist can do all kinds of movement, we're going to look at it as if it was a hinge on a pin going through the wrist at this angle. So it just pivots like this. Moving up the arm, the next hinge is the elbow. We can think of this as a hinge pivoting on a pin orientated this way within the system. The last hinge is the shoulder. We can think of this as a pin going through this way, and it hinges in the following fashion. The elbow just kind of swings out away from the body. You're not lifting it, it's just kind of swinging in and out. So we have the shoulder hinge, the elbow hinge, the wrist hinge, and the fulcrum hinge. Let's look how the wrist and fulcrum work together. Alright, I've marked the 2 hinge points on my hand with these black dots. This dot is the fulcrum hinge. This dot is the wrist hinge. These dots are going to help us see how these 2 hinges move and interact when playing different kinds of strokes. At the top of this video, during the upside down teeter-totter portion, I was demonstrating what are called finger strokes. They're called finger strokes because they're driven by the fingers. To do them, basically I'm trying to immobilize both of the hinges so that the teeter-tottering can be smooth between the fingers and the rebound of the stick. We can also hinge from our wrist and make what are called wrist strokes, moving the hand in this fashion. Now, even though they're called wrist strokes, there aren't any muscles in the wrist. The wrist strokes are actually made by the muscles in your forearm. You can feel it when you move this up and down. There are 2 types of wrist strokes. This is what I call a closed hand wrist stroke. My fingers are around the stick, they're cradling the stick. It's not squeezing the stick, but just lightly cradling the stick. If I take the stick out, you can kind of see this grip. You can feel this. Basically, all you're doing is you take your hand and you take these 3 fingers and lightly touch the palm. Turn it over, and if you tap the tip of your finger on the pad, this is what a closed hand wrist stroke feels like. These are small. You can make them from up here if you like, but it's the same basic thing. These fingers are cradling the stick. If we drop back down into finger position, we can actually use this position to make some wrist strokes as well. Instead of driving from here, making normal finger strokes, if we drive from our wrist and move the whole assembly, we can make what I call open-handed wrist strokes. So we have open-handed wrist strokes, closed-hand wrist strokes, finger strokes. Getting into finger position from this position entails basically dropping our hand or opening our hand and letting the stick recoil. This is the open stroke of the open-close technique. It's the move into finger control position. When I come out of finger control position, I just close my hand, and that is the close from open-close technique. So if we do the move into finger control position and come out of finger control position without playing any finger strokes, we have an open-close 2-note stroke. Notice how the 2 hinges, the wrist and the fulcrum, are oscillating back and forth. If you're having trouble getting the free stroke to happen, you can try this. Over here I have a music stand I put on, and we'll use the music stand to simulate the rebound from the drum. So, if I start from my wrist position, go down, touch the music stand, but follow through and let the music stand support the stick, there's that same, now we're in finger position. if I just close it. Notice when I'm doing this, I'm keeping those two middle and ring finger on the stick. This is kind of what this open close thing feels like. We can use our understanding of these two hinge points to help us see when double strokes are used versus when single strokes are being used. A simple example of this is a double stroke roll. The way most of us are taught, initially the teacher will say, play two singles with the right and then two singles with the left. So we'd be going right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. You can see that these are single strokes because the fulcrum is going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. But the drum is only producing one sound on each cycle. Down, down, dot, 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 but the fulcrum's down, up, down, up. In a double stroke, you'll see this. You will see the fulcrum go down and up, but at a slower speed, and you will hear a note on the down and on the up. Da 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 da. Another giveaway for this is watching this first big knuckle right here. When you see that go down and you hear it go down and up, but you're hearing more than one note, you know that a multi-note stroke is being employed. That's the giveaway for it. And even people that think they aren't playing open-close technique, if they have a good double stroke roll, that's exactly what they're doing with their hand. There's a slight opening and closing. That's how they're getting that double stroke movement. It's natural. It's the way the hand works. We can also use these two dots to see if someone is actually using Moeller technique or open-close technique. Basically, open-close technique, we've looked at where we go down, let's call a three-note stroke. We're going to go open, bounce, close. Da da dee 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 da da dee. In Moeller, we employ a whipping motion, and that's driven from the wrist. So the wrist is going to be the first. We're going to see the wrist move up like this, and the fulcrum kind of following. Whip, whip, da 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 da, as opposed to open close, da 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 da. Moeller. They're two different movements.